After a full week worth of the market diving into the red territory before springing back into the green, some of my holdings presented ideal buying opportunities. So today, I wanted to get right into it in terms of what I bought, coupled with the latest portfolio deep dive. With that, I'm going to go ahead and click open my portfolio tracker with Gitcoin. Now, there is a link down there in my pinned comment and description. If you're not already using some sort of portfolio tracker to track all your success, I highly recommend Gitcoin. But either way, you're going to notice here that on the week, it's exactly what I said happened in terms of this ebbing and flowing throughout the week that ultimately led to my portfolio's current value of $228,471. Now, just 2 weeks ago, based off of a lot of emotional investing, we hit over $230,000. And I believe that once Trump actually takes office and all of his policies begin to override Biden's, I'm very well positioned to actually see my portfolio to launch much higher than just $230,000. So in the meantime, I'm not only sitting tight, but highly focused on just scaling my stocks in focus for 2025, which I'm going to go ahead and cover in just a second. And then, of course, I want to remain steadfast in just keeping to a very simple and consistent process of mine by dollar cost averaging into the S&P and a tech ETF that I'm going to get to in a hot second. But speaking of my portfolio's makeup, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick deep dive with all of you so you can see how my portfolio has actually been sculpted before I just talk about all my latest buys. So we're going to go ahead and pop open Gitcoin one more time. On the top right-hand corner here, we're going to click on Show More. This is what is really going to give us that under-the-hood view of my portfolio. Now, I want you to pay attention here if you've been joining me week in and week out, because you will see changes here between my ETF weighting and my individual stock weighting. But right now, I have 3 ETFs, which I eventually hope to get down to 2 to total out right now to 45% of my portfolio worth of ETFs. From there, I have almost 43% of my portfolio invested into individual stocks, and then I have this massive cash pile here of $26,983. That works out to just under 12% of my portfolio. Now, just being honest with all of you, if I play Monday morning quarterback, which is never a good idea, I actually wish I tossed in all of this into a particular position months back, but either way, this position is here for a mega opportunity once it presents itself, and it just enables me to keep to my S&P strategy. Sector-wise, if we click on sectors, we're going to see I'm 50% of my portfolio there in tech, given my investor profile as a 30-year-old investor. We then jump into other, which is that cash position, and the alike, so I'm going to breeze over this one for now before we find ourselves dealing in the consumer discretionary sector at roughly 10% of my portfolio, followed by healthcare at 9.45% of my portfolio, 5.18% of my portfolio in industrials, 3% there in financials, followed by almost 3% in real estate, which may be chopped soon, so just stay tuned for that news. And then we have slivers below 2% in energy and materials. Now, as for my actual holdings, here we go with almost $54,000 invested into S&P itself with Vanguard's VOO, which is my largest position in my portfolio and what I call my investment foundation that I would strongly encourage all of you investors out there to actually build up just to ensure you never really lose. Then we have the second layer of my foundation, which comes in with another ETF here with the Vanguard Technology Fund, that's ticker symbol VGT. Now, this comes in at almost $31,000 worth of my portfolio, which I own purely for the growth aspect based on my investor profile, as I mentioned before. But another fund here that I would easily recommend to anyone out there who's seeking growth in technology stocks without really having the interest or knowledge of investing into them. Following my 2 ETFs, believe it or not, it is this sizable cash position sitting at, again, nearly $27,000 here. And like I said, this is just allowing me to nibble on a weekly basis into the S&P 500 and waiting for a bigger opportunity. But then we get into my largest individual holding, or the first actual portfolio building block, if you will, on top of my foundation, which is with Apple. That works out to over $26,000. As well as Alphabet here, coming in almost neck and neck with Apple, that has grown tremendously this past year to $21,442. Following, we have this third fund, the Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund, which I do intend to sell to ultimately reallocate all of the capital back into VOO and VGT, as a lot of these holdings actually overlap. But this was my previous initial foundation, so forgive me if I haven't quite sold out of this position just yet. It's not in a tax advantaged account, which is why I haven't really made any moves on it. Following this fund, we have United Health, which is a stock in focus for me in the upcoming year in 2025, and then a growing position here in my portfolio ultimately totaling out to 6% or almost 6% of my portfolio before I tap into another stock in focus with Visa. That works out to $7,700+, followed by Tesla. Now, thanks to the recent run up, totals over 3% of my portfolio, then Realty Income, which is on the sell list for lack of growth given my investor profile, but totaling $6,600+, followed by Amazon Amazon, Lockheed Martin, and then we have 2 micro positions here with McDonald's and Coca-Cola, 2 standout names. Now, investors, there's my portfolio as it stands right now today, and I'll jump back on screen with all of you to actually break down what I ended up buying this past week, because I certainly did not hold back on going on a bit of a shopping spree. The first major purchase I made was actually with United Health, after shares of the stock slid momentarily just before Trump came out to announce that his pick to manage or oversee the government's healthcare insurance unit is going to be Dr. Oz. Now, just after that news, the stock went soaring along with a lot of its peers, so I'm happy to report that I actually bought it on the dip. Of course, I am long on United Health, and I really intend just to load up on this stock opportunity, given it's going to deliver through on 2 things that I'm looking for: dividend growth and just overall total return, share price appreciation. That's most important. Now, I went ahead this past week to score 2 more shares worth of United Health that ultimately totaled out to $1,169.98. And from there, I went ahead to score another share worth of the S&P 500 with VOO that totaled out to $540.61. Nothing really out of the ordinary there. That's just my strategy in play. But this week, as tech slid midweek, I also scored another share worth of Vanguard's tech ETF, VGT, there at $606. Therefore, I spent $1,146 on just these 2 ETFs alone. And finally, just before the week closed out, we had some major news that stole really all of the headlines, with the Department of Justice really coming after Alphabet and ultimately working to have Google spin off Google Chrome, which immediately rattled shareholders and spooked a lot of potential investors. Now, that news ultimately resulted in Alphabet sliding by almost 4% just on this week alone, from over $175 per share to below or around $160 per share. And I just couldn't resist but buying a handful of shares for $836.25, which means this past week I spent a grand total of $3,152.84. Now, that's money well spent. I'd love to catch all of your thoughts on my purchases, my portfolio in and of itself, and most importantly, what exactly you've been doing this past week. So just be sure to comment down below to let us all know your thoughts. Join me right here with a conversation with Ryan Williams, totally unscripted, so you can get in the minds of us as investors. And with that, I'm looking forward to catching you in the next portfolio update or the next video. Be sure to join me on this journey by subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.